Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here for this special conversation between AREAA, Texas Realtors with representatives from the state of Texas and the National Association of Realtors as well. Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia Parenteau. I am the Director of Policy for the Texas Realtors, and I am excited to be moderating this discussion today among these distinguished guests who I will introduce to you now. So first of all, we have Representative Jean Wu from House District 137 here in Texas. State Representative Jean Wu proudly serves the people of District 137. Prior to being elected in 2012, he served as a prosecutor in the Harris County District Attorney's Office, where he sought justice for thousands of crime victims. He was reelected and is serving his fourth term in office. In the 86th legislative session, which for us was in 2019, he was appointed to the House Committees on Appropriations, as well as Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services. Outside his legislative work, Representative Wu remains active and involved in the Houston community. And for the past 9 years, he's worked with Neighborhood Centers Incorporated and conducting monthly workshops that have helped several thousand Harris County residents become United States citizens. Jean grew up in Southwest Houston neighborhood of Sharpstown and earned his Bachelor of Science degree from Texas A&M, a master's from the LBJ School for Public Affairs in Austin, and a law degree from South Texas College of Law in Houston. Welcome, Representative Wu.
Thank you.
Then we have James Huang, the 2020 AREAA President. Prior to joining Sperry Commercial Global Affiliates, James was the founder and CEO of BRC Advisors, a full-service commercial real estate brokerage firm based in Los Angeles and specializing in investment, sales and leasing, property management and advisory services, debt and equity investment platforms, and construction design and building services to a national client base. With 7 offices throughout Southern California and over 150 commercial brokers, James successfully led a team of real estate professionals who shared the same innovative approach to commercial real estate, a belief in the power of superior market knowledge and exceptional client service. James brings with him more than 20 years of experience in the commercial real estate industry and is currently your 2020 president of the Asian Real Estate Association of America. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
And then last but in no way least, we have April Gavin, the NAR Senior Political Representative. April has the pleasure of working with Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And she is a native Texan, which we always have to call out. And April has worked in the political realm for 16 years. And prior to joining NAR, she was a senior political manager for the Associated Builders and Contractors. Her experience also includes working as a policy analyst, working for a direct mail firm that specializes in get out the vote and fundraising mailers, fundraising for nonprofits, as well as coordinating grassroots efforts. April is a proud graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, and earned her master's degree in political management from the George Washington University. She lives in Alexandria, Virginia with her husband, Brian, and daughter, Caroline. Welcome, everyone, and thank you again for being here. We're so excited to have this conversation about Asian American homeownership, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and what we can do going forward to all work together to advance our collective goals. So we are going to jump right in to the discussion and start with an overview of Asian American and Pacific Islanders home ownership rates in general. And James is going to tell us a little bit about how those rates are going nationally, and then we'll narrow down to Texas. James.
Great. Julia, thank you for the opportunity. AREAA, the Texas Realtors, all Realtors, real estate, everyone that is working together to get through COVID-19. So I just wanted to say that hello to everyone, and let me share my screen with everyone. So thank you again for this opportunity to share a little bit about what's going on within the AAPI community when it comes to home ownership. For those that haven't got the report yet, please look at the link below. I know you're going to also share it in the chat box so everyone can get this report. It is a very powerful report that we have put together this year So I'll just leave it up a little so everyone can hopefully see it, and it's in the chat. So this is a little more information about the State of Asia America report that we put together this year for homeownership. And we did something a little different in the homeownership package, where one, we put a timeline from the mid 1700s to date about the AAPI community, our involvement with the different groups that we have, because we represent over 51 different languages and 26 different ethnicities. And everyone can see our population is around 19 million, which is about 5.8% of the total population in the US. And we've grown 25% from the last Census Bureau of 2010. One of the things that, like I said, we split up and disaggregated the data this year from the Asian Americans, which is Chinese, Korean, Japanese, the big countries. And then we have the Pacific Islanders, which is a lot of the Southeast Asians. So when everyone looks at this data that's disaggregated rather than just put together, like we always say, AAPI, we're not this big monolith, but we are a bunch of different groups. And so 57% of the populations have home ownership. But when you look at it, we have 87,000 is our annual average household income, which is 41% than the average. But the homes that we buy from the Asian Americans are about 445,000, which is higher by 98% than the average homes that most people buy. But when you break it up into Pacific Islanders, that number drops to 42.3% for Pacific Islanders versus the 57%. And also their household income drops to 81.9%, $900, which is about 4% less than the average. And their home value is about $319,000 on their average. So, you know, a lot of very useful information on the different types. And when we break it up even further, right now you'll see the whites, non-Hispanic whites, they're around 86%, where then you look at the average of the national average, which is about 63.9%. The Asians are about 59%, but then when you look at the Pacific Islanders, you drop down to 40.3, but then you look down to Micronesia, Nepalese, you're down now to about the 25%. So when you look from as high as the Taiwanese, that is around the 69%, all the way down to Micro-Asians, now you're down to 25%. You can see you can't really lump the entire AAPI community as one large group. So as you see the breakup, it is very broad and very vast, and that's why it's very important to understand the community and how different it is. Now we're going to go into Texas ownership. So a little bit about Texas, which we were talking a little bit beforehand. From California, so many of Californians' AAPI communities are moving to Texas. And from the Census Bureau for 2020, we have a population for the AAPI community about 1.5 million. That's 128% population growth in the state of Texas from 2000. And the largest AAPI concentrations are Indians that are about 400,000, the Vietnamese, which is close to 300,000, the Chinese, which is about 233,000, the Filipinos of about 180,000, Koreans, 92,000, and the Pakistanis about 75,000. So as everyone can see through the different AAPIs, there's a large growth and population in the Texas market. And in April 2020, the Texas homeownership rate was 66.3%. For homeowners rates by race, the first quarter of COVID, of the non-Hispanic white alone. But then next with the rate of 73.7%, which is the non-Hispanic white, then we have the rate of the Asians, non-Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, which was second at 59.1%. And the lowest ones that we have was the African Americans, which is 44%. So as everyone knows, there's still a lot of work that we need to do with home ownership for all the different ethnicities, cultures, and groups to help bring those numbers up. So that is a little bit of sharing of from the national level of the AAPI community, also within Texas, but also the disaggregation of how the AAPI community is sometimes lumped into an average number. But when you break it up into the 26 different countries, you're going to see as high as the 69%, all the way down to about 25%. So it's great to have and study the State of Asia America report we did this year, so you really understand the history of the Asian Americans, AAPI, and also the different subgroups and really where they're moving. Thank you.
Sorry, I had a mute problem. Thank you for that. That's a really fascinating overview. Representative Wu, we talked a little bit about the migration patterns around Houston locally. Tell me what you're seeing there at home.
So I think one of the really important things to note, especially when you're talking about the sort of like advancement of Asian Americans in the greater Houston area, is talk about how our community started. And one of the things that's really important to note is, unlike other minority communities, our community didn't exist here 100 years ago. The really big chunk of the population started coming in the 1980s. And if you look at where Asiatown is right now, it's in the Southwest. That's where a large part of the population settled, because it was a nice, comfortable area. It wasn't too expensive back before the Beltway was built. And there was just some apartment complexes, and a lot of Asian Americans and a lot of immigrants settled in Southwest Houston. And over the years, if you look at some of the studies that have been done at Rice, I think there's an entire book written about this, that Asian Americans, as they became more wealthy, as they have developed their careers, as they built their businesses, they moved west, southwest, and south. So if you look at where the emerging real estate markets are, where the big pushes for new homes, even new higher end apartment complexes are, they're in those areas. They're in Sugar Land, they're in Katy, they're in Pearland, and that's where the Asian American population is going. And again, I really want to emphasize that it's not just the Chinese, it's not just the Vietnamese, it's not just the Koreans, it's not just Indians and Pakistanis and everyone else, it's everybody. It's and as James said, it's really important to note that the Asian American population is not a monolithic block, that you can't really sum up what the Asian American population is doing and how they're doing by just throwing everyone under one umbrella. It doesn't really work that way. And every group has its own little niche, own little way of thinking and doing things. And unsurprisingly, many Asian American groups, even after, especially when they first get here, tend to want to congregate in the same place, near their own businesses, near people who are related to them, near people who speak their language, near their own churches. So we have Korean parts of town, we have Vietnamese parts of town, we have Chinese parts of town, and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting to study this entire movement, because you can track the economy and the well-being of Houston by how the Asian American community is doing, because I think our community drives so much of the economy around the city, and we make up such a large amount of the tax base and the employment base and everything else.
So I just finished reading, sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent, but I just finished reading a book called Prisoners of Geography. It's fantastic if you haven't read it. And all of that, without going too far into it, geography is not one of my personal strong suits. So, but that book is so great. It taught me a lot about, just when we say Asia, what it gigantic, like from Russia all the way to, our Pacific Islands, what that encompasses. And so your points about the nuance under that term are very well taken. We'll try to respect that. And perhaps we need to do a follow-up class when we'll start with a globe and dig into all of the different subgroups that are contained under that umbrella. While we're in Houston, thinking about Houston, Representative Wu, let's talk a little bit about, pardon me?
Just Gene, please.
Yes. While we're talking about what's happening there, I think there was a lot of concern when the pandemic originally hit about what the impact to the real estate market was going to be. So when we look at June, however, what we are noticing is that overall, and I'm just thinking about statistics in the Houston, Woodland, Sugarland, that whole market area, prices are up, closed sales are up, active listings are down, which also drives, prices generally. And so things are not exactly maybe going the way that we were concerned they might. Now, there's some different figures when we drill down neighborhood by neighborhood, but tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from your constituents in terms of particular challenges they've faced since the pandemic, whether in buying or selling or just accessing housing in general.
Yeah, and we had the same concerns going into the pandemic as you mentioned, and we were pleasantly surprised too. And I think it actually comes down to who is being affected by the shutdown. If you look at who is being hit the hardest, it's people who can't work from home, people who can't do telecommute, and that is lower income workers, workers who are more blue collar. And so people who are buying $200,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 homes, they're still buying those homes because for the most part, I mean, if you're an attorney like me, your job is affected somewhat, but for the most part, you're still doing your job, you're still making money. It's the people who are middle class, people who are in lower end of the economic ladder that are suffering the most and who are basically in trouble. And a lot of those people are renters, and a lot of those people were not in the market in the home in the first place. And I think that brings its own concerns and that needs to be a topic of discussion on its own.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I'm concerned about now, especially as someone who's trying to sell a house right now, because we just moved into our new house and we're trying to sell an old one, is actually the oil market. That's actually my biggest concern is the oil market. We're trying to sell a $300,000-$400,000 home, and a lot of our potential buyers are oil and gas people. In fact, the complex where our home that we're trying to sell is situated, there's like four other houses out of this 8 that are in the gas market, and so that is particularly concerning. That the oil industry's been hit really hard. I think it's going to get hit harder. And the second thing that I'm really concerned about is our ongoing war with, like sort of Cold War with China right now. That this is a souring of relationships, a souring of economic ties for the Houston area. This is a economic tie that is very, very important for the real estate market, simply because we have Chinese companies that are bringing their headquarters here, that are bringing their distribution plants here, that are bringing their manufacturing to the coast. And they're bringing thousands and thousands of Chinese expats, so their executives, their managers, and whatever else. They're coming here, they have to live somewhere. And one of the big selling points, whenever I've gone on trade missions with a mayor or to China, to Japan, to Taiwan, anytime that we go and try to sell Houston, I'm telling you, I don't talk about business. The first thing I talk about is, hey, would you like to own a 7,000 square foot home for $200,000 or $300,000? And after I pick them up off the floor, and after they regain consciousness, they're like, yes, we are all about that. Because, if you're from Beijing and you're an executive and you've paid like $3 million for a 1,000 square foot apartment, all of a sudden this concept of having this massive 2-acre property for $500,000, that they're like, yes, how do we sign up for that? I want that right now. The problem is, if we have the souring of relationships, that's a good chunk of people off the market. Those executives, China could very well next day say, like, look, we're cutting all these contracts. Everyone bring your stuff home. I don't think they're going to do that. That's kind of extreme, but it's not impossible. And I'm very concerned that with the souring of relationships, that the Chinese companies are not going to make these billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of investments here in Texas, and they're not going to bring their executives here who are just looking to spend and looking to buy property in the U.S. Not only for their own families, but also to sometimes to shield their money from the Chinese government.
Okay, I have follow-up questions on that, and while I crystallize those, let me turn to James and say, California obviously is, had a massive demand from especially Eastern Asian buyers and companies for decades now. Are you seeing similar trends to what Representative Wu is talking about in your markets there?
We have seen a lot because of the immigration, the migration that people are coming in from Asia to the US, and also moving into the newer communities like in Irvine, where like San Gabriel, where used to be the hub of the Asian Americans or Asians in that location, are moving into newer communities like in Irvine. But when you're looking at it, it is like this supply and demand where there is not as much properties. There is still great interest rates out there if you qualify, and that's what we're going to talk later on about alternative credit. But the demand is still very high, that they're still looking for that opportunity. And this is why there is a lot of migration outside of California looking for, Gene, we may all be there in California very quick, because it's literally twice to 3 times the amount for the same property. And you guys give you a lot more. Besides the weather we were talking about, but besides that, you get a lot more bang for your buck. And that's why a lot of times you may come into California first, the gateway cities, but once you figure it out, you're like, I'm going to move to another location where I can get the great schools, the great economic opportunities, and I can own 3 to 4 times the home for the same price.
I mean, the draw of owning a big house, I cannot undersell that enough. Especially for Asian countries that are just packed to the gills. If you're talking about Tokyo, whose real estate is just insanity, coming to even visiting Houston, and a lot of times we've driven people around the city, just put them in our cars and just drove them through River Oaks and say, your $3 million apartment in Tokyo, this is what it gets you. You see this thing over here? You see this giant mansion? That's what it gets you here. And they're all of a sudden, they don't care about the tax breaks. They don't care about the economic incentives. They're like, I want the house.
Right. So there's so much more to talk about here. And I want to go back, Representative Wu, to what you were talking about with the souring relationships. And we have to get into some of our legislative proposals and all of that. But before we depart this topic, as you're talking about those relationships, in thinking about how we reverse that course, it seems to me that we have sort of a trifecta of problems that are causing that. Economic, if the business isn't here for those companies to invest in and be successful, there's no reason to come. Political. And then cultural, and I bring that up because we've had 1 or 2 questions already in the Q&A about anti-Chinese sentiments and even closing the Chinese consulate office in Houston as a reaction to COVID-19. Without going too far into this, what's your sense for how quickly we might be able to right those courses of negativity that are happening right now?
So I think that this was damage that was done even before Trump was elected. Even before Trump was elected, I've been a part of greeting groups where we've met Asian companies who have come over from all over Asia. And we've had at least 2 different times where they see me as the only Asian in the room, and they pull me aside and they ask me, like, look, really, straight talk, no bullshit. Like, are they going to treat us fairly here? We've heard really bad things about Texans. We've heard really that they're racist and they're going to treat Chinese people badly. They're going to treat Japanese people badly. Is it really true? Are they going to give us a fair shot? And, you know, I have to look them in the eye and say, no, this is Houston, at least. I can't speak for everyone else, but I'm a Houstonian, and Houston will give you a fair shot. Houston is a city of diversity and of tolerance, and we treat everyone right. So we welcome you here. But those are real concerns. And and you know, they, at the end of their decision tree, if they decide that a place is not friendly to them, if they can't live there, if their families won't be safe there, you're not going to go. It doesn't matter what the economic incentives are. It doesn't matter what the tax breaks are. If somebody thinks that they can't move their family to a location and have them be safe, they're not going to come. And I think that's the bad part. The good part is, I think because we have such a large Asian American community, both here and in San Francisco and other major cities, that we can quickly rebuild this trust. I think, you know, I'm a little bit biased about this, but I think we can have a change of leadership in the White House after November. And I think that can go a long ways to fixing a lot of the ties, not only with China, but also with other Asian countries. Japan's mad at us. I mean, Japan's not had a good time under Trump. Neither has Taiwan, really, and a lot of other places. And we are going to have to spend effort to rebuild this. And it's not just a federal national effort, but it's also a state effort. I know sort of the sense of frustration, both the city and the state. We've spent literally a decade trying to court and build relationships with China to let them know that this is a good place to build their headquarters and build their facilities. And I think with the closing of the consulate, everyone is scared that all that work, all that effort, all that money spent has just been thrown out the door. And I really hope it's not.
James? That's a very open-ended question to follow up on, but generally agree, disagree? What's the sentiment like in the folks you're talking to?
So, you know, with my conversations, just kind of whispering without being, it is there, its presence. We see it kind of in social media. Sometimes people are talking to each other that sometimes they say, is it safe? Can I move there? And of course, the large populations where AAPIs, they do feel safe there, those pockets, but with the movement into other pockets, they are now questioning. So before they would just say, it's a great deal, let's just move there. Now they're like, is it safe? Can I move there? I don't know if I can move there. So they may hold off, they may delay, or they may find alternatives. They want to feel that wherever they go, it is a safe place to live, and they're not going to face, well, discrimination. And the terrible thing is, you know, when they're targeting people or saying something, they're not even Chinese a lot of times. I had Filipino friends, I had Indian friends, and it's just saying that, like putting us all together when at least you're not even getting it right. But this should not happen to anybody. You should be able to go and live where you want, right? We're always talking about fair housing. So I think it is important for all realtors, everyone, to keep that word out, to make sure that it is a good, safe, friendly environment, and do your part. Everyone needs to do their part to bring, you know, to get everyone to be accepting, to understand different cultures. It is very important.
And you may have both just given your closing statements. So along those lines, let me turn to April, and let's first talk a little bit about what Congress has been doing in terms of pandemic response to address some of the issues that we've brought up already here today, whether it's employment, staying in your housing, or continuing to be able to access it. Give us a little overview of what's been going on this year.
Well, it has been crazy in Washington this year, and I will say it's usually crazy in Washington. Folks are not getting along. It's an election year, so that also adds another layer of color to all the different legislation that is moving through. But on top of just their normal job that Congress has to do, they've been having to, obviously, as y'all have noticed, basically provide a stopgap for the American people and millions of Americans that are currently unemployed because of the pandemic. And so this truly is an unprecedented time, and the pressure is really on between both sides of the aisle, frankly. And I think everyone wants to do the best that they can to help their constituents, regardless of their political leanings, which is good. That's nice. That's nice that they can kind of put aside their partisan ideas and try to move things forward. So what happened in March was there was a package called the CARES Act that was passed. That was the original package was $360 billion in relief. Then in April, there was an additional package that was passed. There was another $370 billion in aid. We have a very detailed summary of the legislation that's available on our website, and exactly what our members as independent contractors or small business owners can do to take advantage of and utilize the tools that Congress has provided. I won't go into super detail on that. I will say that most recently, there was a package that was passed. It's the PPP Flexibility Act. And the highlights of that package, basically Congress came back in and said, okay, this is what we passed all this money to be out to help stimulate the economy, support these small businesses, independent contractors, but it was too rigid. And so they basically redefined kind of what their original intent was and allowed more flexibility, as the bill is so aptly named, for people to be able to utilize those funds. The highlights are they took the amount of money that was supposed to be used for payroll from 75% down to 60%. So that's great. That allows small business owners, more flexibility in how they're going to utilize their funds. And it also increased the time if a business does take out a loan, in which they would have to be able to repay the loan. So from 2 years to 5 years. So we think that was a really good first step. And then, as you know, they're in talks of package 4, 5, 6 right now to again increase those funds for the American people to be able to access that. So it'll be interesting.
So I've seen some news just even this morning. Over the weekend, someone made a statement, I think on one of the Sunday talk shows, that they were going to do another $1,200 economic stimulus payment to households across the U.S. I don't know if it's as done a deal as that made it seem like.
Yeah, no.
But,
and that's the sticking point, right? So the Republicans in an election year control the Senate. The Senate is in very much danger of flipping. And so they're very, very much aware of that. And Republicans are having a hard time kind of in the vein of their fiscal responsibility of authorizing another giant bailout package, essentially. So it's not that they don't want to be helpful, it's just in reality, is this really going to stimulate the economy the way that they were hoping it would? And do they want to sign off on a price tag that's that large? So I think that the numbers that I've heard that Republicans were talking about was $200, and then I've heard the House was really looking at a $600 per person type of funding. And so it's how are they going to come to have a meeting of the minds on what that number really looks like. So it'll be interesting to see.
Specific to housing, I know it's a concern for some of Representative Wu's constituents and probably some of James's clients and their families. The provisions that Congress passed earlier this year to put a halt to certain evictions and foreclosures, allow folks with mortgages to go into forbearance in a more flexible way. What's your take on whether those provisions are going to get extended?
We are hoping that they are going to be extended. We sent a priority if you will, letter to the Hill, kind of outlining what we think needs to happen to help stabilize the housing market. And we feel that, so this is a fun little fact that I learned, that there are 9.5 million jobs that are associated with the real estate industry, and that every 2 home sales actually generates 1 job. That's kind of what it turns into, which I thought was really, really interesting. So we feel like anything that we can do to help stabilize the housing market will have a significant impact on the overall national economic stability. And so we definitely think it's important to make sure that we don't rock the housing market in whatever we do. So that was one of the things that is in the letter, is to continue with the forbearance and rent assistance, if you will, going forward until we're out of kind of the woods of the pandemic. So yes, we're definitely in favor of that and supporting that.
Great. James, talk to us a little bit about how has AREAA engaged in any of those extension conversations? And if so, how?
Yes, so basically we're always teaching and helping our leadership, our membership, pass around good information. We do plug into NAR so often, getting whatever they're advocating for us, all the realtors and the home buyers. So it's really important for us to get the knowledge translated because of our different languages, so our clients really understand really what's going on. And it is adversely impacting a lot of the small business owners, Asian small business owners, through this because of that extra COVID, or the racial attachment to what it is. And so now it's affecting our small businesses more than ever. So the stimulus is so important, nothing to themselves of working hard to do anything. They just can't do anything. They're just shut down. So you shouldn't allow this, because we know housing is so fundamental. It's the largest wealth creation of anything, is your home. And we cannot impact all communities, especially the communities of color, break it down. So now they have to catch up again, because this will severely impact their wealth creation. And we should just make sure that everyone stays intact till we get through this, and then obviously trying to get the job market right back. So they want to work, people want to work, but if you can't, what are you going to do? So it is so important, but we know within the African-American, Asian community, it's adversely being affected with the small businesses right now.
Definitely. Representative Wu, on that note, kind of a 2-part. Have you seen some good support for your constituents that have come out of the CARES Act and everything that Congress has done so far? And on the other hand, what needs do we still need to address, and in what priority order? Sorry, that's a hard
question to answer.
I know.
But, I represent a large immigrant population. A large percentage of that population is undocumented. So they're not getting any help, period. And my district is also a hotspot for COVID, because those are also the people who are essential workers. They're the ones cooking food. They're the ones making food. They're the ones serving food. They're the ones cleaning toilets. They're the ones mowing lawns. Those all things are still being done. And the simple fact is, there's no way to put it. They're not getting any help. Right now we're struggling even to get them tested, because people are fearful that if they get tested, that somebody's going to call ICE. That if they go out to a location and they get tested and they're positive, then they can't go back to work, because they have no other way of surviving. That getting a government check is not even an option for them. They're not getting the help, and that is making the pandemic worse for everyone else, because their numbers are part of the numbers that are driving up our statewide numbers, keeping us basically in this twilight zone of just not shut down. The other part of it is this. The PPE helped a lot of businesses, but they didn't help a lot of minority businesses. A lot of it is because of a lot of these businesses, a lot of minority businesses are smaller businesses. I mean, I'm sure you've seen articles that multi-million-dollar companies were applying for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of PPE grants or loans. And, you know, our small businesses around here, they needed the money really badly, but they didn't have they were scared to do it. They didn't know how to do it. They didn't feel safe doing it. They weren't sure if it was for them. And, you know, in terms of CARES money, I mean, I have a whole big beef with how the governor is holding up the CARES money that should have gone to our cities, should have gone to our counties, should have gone to our school districts for them to make people's lives a little better, to help with testing, to help with contact tracing. But instead, the governor is sitting on like $4-6 billion of that money, you know, and people like local officials have been yelling at them for a month now, saying like, "What? Just give us the money." At the end of the day, I'm not sure this is my closing, but I mean, I want to say this while it's fresh in my mind, but you know, my family moved to this area like 30 something years ago, and we lived in apartments for like almost a decade. And we saved and we saved and we saved and we saved, and we bought a $40,000 house. Like literally, I have a car that's more than that right now. And that is the story of a lot of people in this district. People who have come here from other countries, people who come here with literally nothing. And they work their asses off. And whether they're here legally, whether they're here illegally, it doesn't matter. They're working to serve us, and they're breaking their own back, and now they're literally dying to make sure that we have a comfortable life. And the thing that scares me is that the people who have come here to do this, to build the American dream, they're getting set further back, and they're not going to be able to buy that $40,000 house or that $60,000 house after saving, because they've burned through their savings now. Their savings are gone because maybe only one of the family members can work, or maybe none of the family members can work, and they're burning through their savings, and all the money they were saving up for a house is gone. And they're slowly getting pushed further and further down the hole, and that should be something that's very concerning for not only lawmakers, but for realtors, for all realtors, because the middle class is where the real estate market comes from. You know, I mean, if you're lucky enough to be the ones who sell multi-million-dollar houses, that's fantastic. But I would say most realtors out there, you make your bread and butter selling, you know, $200,000-$300,000 homes or even less, and you sell lots of them. And that market, that population, is the populations that's getting hurt the most. The middle class, the true middle class, or even the rising lower class, the rising poor, who are trying to work their way out of the hole. And this is especially relevant, as I talked about, with the Asian American community, because if you look at some of the data, you shouldn't be surprised that the groups that are here that have been here less time, there's less home ownership, and the groups that have been here longer time, they have more home ownership. Surprise. And you know, and the scary thing is, if you don't have a robust middle class, you don't have a robust economy. And if you don't have a robust economy, like, where are we? Where are we as a country? So I don't know.
And I don't know that you exactly intended to do this, but you gave me a perfect segue into AREAA's 3-point plan on boosting homeownership for our Asian American and Pacific Islanders. Before I ask James to talk just a little bit about that, I'm going to say it's 2:48. We had originally scheduled this program for 45 minutes, knowing that we had a really ambitious agenda. So I'm going to make an executive decision that this thing is going the full hour. If you can stay with us, please do. And we're going to jump into AREAA's 3-point plan, and then talk a little bit about how all of our organizations work together and how you all can too. All right, James, give us a brief overview of AREAA's 3-point plan. We have 3 specific, well, 1 more general and 2 actual very specific legislative proposals that AREAA is focusing on right now to help increase some home ownership rates.
So our 3-point plans, we had GSE reform, where Asians borrow at 92% conventional loans, more than any other loan. So we needed to make sure when it came out of receivership, it would still stay intact because we borrow so much using the conventional loans. 92% is what Asian Americans or Asians use for their loans. But what we're trying to do too is obviously educate them that you don't have to put that much money down. You can use the other services to borrow, but that's a cultural thing where a lot of Asians don't like to borrow money. They don't like to, build up debt. And that was our other part of our 3-point plan, which is alternative credit. That we knew if you used another way of scoring credit, and this affects all different groups, that you can now offer 30 million more people to be scored, and in the AAPI, 3 million that could be ready to buy a home. It's just that we have very thin credit files, which doesn't mean bad credit. It's just no credit. They just can't track, what you've done. But if they paid like cell phones, paying rent, as just many come in as renters, they are paying those time in without delay, but there's no way to track them. So I think by allowing other ways, other forms besides FICO to score credit, you will unleash a lot more opportunities for everyone to be scored, and also to get their opportunity to be a first-time home buyer. And then the third point of our 3-point plan is what we've been advocating is very unique to us, is that we're 26 different countries, 51 different languages. Obviously, we want to get the big languages, the Chinese, Indian, Filipino, all these languages that we can help understand, because within AREAA, many of the kids, as their parents, are going through the mortgage process. I mean, we all know that it's hard enough as English speakers to read this and go through it. It's like doing calculus or something. To get a little child that understands English that their parents don't understand is, what does this mean? What is this? And they're sitting, filling out financial documents, borrowing money, and even going with them to escrow, closing a deal, because their parents really don't understand what they're signing, but they trust their child or the best English speaker in their home to decipher this for them. So that's what we said. It's very important, especially this within our community of speaking so many different languages, that language access. So people can understand what they're signing and not rely on the best English speaker in their home, which is usually their children. So.
And actual children, 10 years old, or along those lines. So the language question that you're talking about, that and the alternative credit modeling, there are two specific bills, and the language access one is actually, if I understand the proposal correctly, it's simply a proposal to collect data on what the mortgage applicant's preferred language is. It's not actually a mandate to produce the form in those languages, but to do the initial data collection that determines where the biggest concentrations of language preference are. Does that sound right?
Yes, and that's with HR 123 with Al Green, Representative Al Green, a longtime great support of AREAA. So, we have always been very thankful of the relationship we have with Representative Al Green.
For any non-Texans we might have in the audience, he's one of our congressmen out of the Houston area. And he is also the sponsor of the bill that relates to the additional credit pilot program.
Correct.
So April, you may not be able to tell us what NAR's positions on these particular pieces of legislation are, but generally talk to us about their likelihood of passage. How long does stuff usually take to get through Congress? Both of those two specific bills that James mentioned have action that happened in 2018, but not much since.
Yeah, right.
What's the landscape look like?
Well, there are some must happens that have to get passed within the next 30 days because things like the transportation pact, like federal funded highways and things like that, we have to reauthorize the payment of that by the end of September. We also have the flood insurance program, which has to be reauthorized as well, same end of September date, in addition to just the regular order of business. So new and oftentimes, especially this close to an election, really good ideas don't have a lot of traction because the other team doesn't want someone else to get credit for it, right? So oftentimes what you'll see is things move in what we call the lame duck session, which would be after the election before the next Congress goes into effect. So all of this is to say, I don't know if it's likely for it to pass. Congress in the last few years has actually moved less legislation than they historically have in like the last 50 years, which is very interesting. Some people don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Some people do. It kind of depends on how fond you are of legislators legislating. So I think we NAR has been supportive of alternative credit modeling and for several years. So I think this would be something that we would definitely be supportive of as a concept and as a whole. And I will say that our policy people are currently reviewing both pieces of legislation. So hopefully we'll be able to partner on those going forward. More to come.
Well, so just considering the political environment and timing of our legislative and election cycles where we are right now, if anything is going to get done, it's going to be because it's a big concerted group effort. So James, it I think has been a priority for both AREAA and NAR to make sure that our organizations are working more closely together. Talk to us a little bit about what AREAA's priorities are as it relates to that.
Yeah, so it is important to work with the largest advocating group for especially real estate, but a very powerful group with NAR. So it's really letting them know, what are our issues? What does it affect us? And as April said, with alternative credit, that helps everyone. So some of these initiatives that we're working on does really benefit the whole with all communities. Some of them, like I said, are specific, and we just have to advocate and let people understand why. Just like the Hispanic, to translate in Spanish so people understand why. And these are the same reasons. So what we do is there are things that we all come together, work as a group, right? This is something we can all get behind. But there's other things that individually from AREAA and other trade groups, we need to keep on advocating. We need to keep on putting in front so people understand. Otherwise, it will decrease our home ownership, especially with the diversity of what's in the AAPI community, from those that have been here 4 or 5 generations versus the new immigrants who are just coming to America and they're completely lost and they haven't built their infrastructure yet. But that's why AREAA is so important. We do have people in there within our organization to help be that kind of bridge during the time being while we're advocating. Every year advocating and speaking to whoever will listen to us.
Representative Wu, you've gone through your 4th session as a legislator here in Texas. You obviously have worked really closely with the Houston AREAA chapter in the past. We've got the Houston Association of REALTORs. You've got us here in Austin. What's your experience been like working with all 3 of our organizations? And please be honest, if there's anything we can do to improve the way we work together as we talk to you and your colleagues in the legislature, let us know.
Absolutely. And, just you want an honest answer. Here's an honest answer. I really do appreciate Texas Association of Realtors because not only have y'all supported me in the past, but also, I don't think your policy decisions and policy goals are monolithic. And I think a lot of people would think that, oh, the realtors are very conservative. They must support a lot of Republicans. But I think the realtors support a lot of policy issues on both sides of the aisle, and I really appreciate that. I think your policy issues are well thought out, and they're very clearly designed to help Texans. And I genuinely appreciate that. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on a lot of stuff, and the stuff that we agree on together, I know would generally make the state a better place. And I again want to thank you all for that, and I really appreciate it. And I am tremendously proud of AREAA because this is a group, especially in Houston, that didn't exist when I first started. And I'll tell you just a little bit of story. When I first got elected, I kind of said to myself, I can't be the Asian rep. Right? I can't just be the Asian rep because that's all everyone will tag me with, and I will never get anything done. And So I try to avoid that. I try to avoid doing a lot of stuff that puts me in that light. But over time, I kind of realized, you know, if I don't represent the Asian community, not just for Houston, but for Texas, who's going to? Because we don't have a lot of other elected Asians around the state. And that's why I was so happy when AREAA came on the scene, especially around here, because not only did they represent a very large group of realtors and a very powerful business people, but they took the initiative to help represent the Asian American community, not just the Chinese, not just the Vietnamese, not just the Pakistanis or Indians, but everybody. And that is something that is rare. As someone who has to deal with the community infighting among our Asian community, I thought it was refreshing and just heartwarming to have a group that came in and advocated not just for realtors, but advocated for the entire Asian American community. And I could not be more proud. And I know they helped set up Asian American Day at the legislature. You know, I'll tell you, the first time we had that, I had like 2 members standing with me at the front. And by God, every year, every session that we had after that, there were more and more and more. And people finally started to realize how many Asian Americans lived in their district and how important they were to their reelection. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for organizing that. You know, let's keep going.
Fantastic, thank you. Way to go, Houston, AREAA, you guys are killing it. And led by stellar example at the national organization, of course. It is 3 o'clock. It is very clear that we probably could have spent all day talking to y'all, but we want to wrap things up. If there are outstanding questions that we didn't get answered, I think we tried to touch on most of them. But if you need any follow-up, we'll put our contact information out so you can get answers to your questions. April, any closing thoughts on everything we've discussed? I know that's huge.
That's huge. Yes, I learned so much. So thank you for letting me join you today. I learned from the other panelists as well, and it's great. And I look forward to working with everybody again. Thank
you. Representative Wu, you said great things. Anything else you want to say to the audience?
No, I know a lot of people who are on watching right now, and I haven't seen y'all in person at least for a long time, and I just want to say I miss all of y'all, and I hope I can see you soon.
And finally, James.
Thank you for the opportunity for us to share. Let's all work as Americans to get through this together, so we can go to as business as normal as we can. So just, you know, stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Thank you all so much for being here and for this really fascinating conversation. As I said, we'll put out some follow-up information. If you need anything else, please contact me or any of your Texas Realtor staff, Tiffany Wu, Jamie Sims. We are here to help, and we can put you in touch with the right people in our panelist offices if you want to talk to them again. Thank you. Thank you. You all have a great rest of your, I think we determined this is Monday. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.